Hello all, and let me start by saying what the fuck have I just watched? If you thought Whittaker's run was bad, hang on to your hats. I know that may seem like hyperbole, but really, this show couldn't be further away from what's come before. Because as bad as Whittaker's run was, it didn't dump all over what made the show special, in favour of camp absurdity. We start with episode 1, Space Babies, and it's an appropriate name because both the Doctor and Ruby were incredibly infantile throughout. We start with a massive exposition dump, presumably for all those new viewers they won't be getting, and over-explanation is a recurring feature, though the exposition isn't as bad as Chibber's stuff. The two leads acting was really just bad. Millie as Ruby feels like a bargain basement and far more irritating Clara, even to the extent of being the mystery girl, and hitting similar beats. Ncuti is more hammy than a 50-year-old white man talking about Brexit. That's a gammon joke for those who didn't get it. They spoke like they were kids' TV presenters, and everything felt performative. Now I know they're actors, but you're supposed to buy into them in the role. It's like they're the organisers at an enforced fun event, running around with painted-on smiles, just yelling at us how much fun it all is whilst we're all dying inside. Ncuti spends most of the time overacting with high camp. Then, every time the Doctor recounts the past, the genocide of his people, and boy does he keep mentioning it, it's like someone flicks a switch and we get sad Ncuti. Happy Ncuti, sad Ncuti. There's no nuance here. He also keeps banging on about being adopted, hammering those timeless child coffin nails into the history of the show. Which is ironic, because RTD seems to have abandoned a lot of New Who mythology, including what the Doctor is, even what his name means, and its history. To the extent that at the end of the first episode, the Doctor walks out into Ruby's home and is about to tell them his name. The message is here, but surprisingly for RTD, it's clumsily plonked in, and at times it doesn't work and doesn't make a lot of sense. One of those was about being happy in yourself, whatever you grow up to be, and it's a worthwhile message, but boy was it on the nose. The story itself had a kernel of a good idea, and was clearly supposed to be a fun throwaway episode, but it's wrapped up in so much irritating stupidity and bad acting, I just got turned off. The Devil's Chord, similarly, has a good nub of an idea, and works better probably because, for the most part, it's an almost complete 180 tonal shift. Well, until those last painful few minutes, that is. Obviously, the casting of Jinx Monsoon set those alarm bells ringing, especially after all the gender ideology forced into the latest Tennant episodes and the recent series armour dropped by Ncuti and RTD. You know, the everyone's an estrophobe if they don't like it stuff. The gender ideology is once again there. They cast a drag queen as an antagonist after all. But Jinx is probably the best thing in it, though at times also the worst. He flips between a lovely eerie menace, not unlike the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, then sadly drifts into overblown absurdity, kind of Absorbeloff territory. The balance isn't quite right. We still have to deal with Millie and Ncuti's overacting, which is just jarring, and for fear of sounding un-PC, sometimes, when Ncuti raises his voice, I really can't understand him. There's also an unearned familiarity between them. I'm not saying this wasn't here previously, but there's a moment where Ruby says to the Doctor that he's never scared, which is something that really should be happening far later in the series, especially because in the previous episode he was also scared, and there's only been 3. There are some good moments, and one particular cool scene involving the Doctor's sonic computer mouse, which felt strangely familiar, but it worked really nicely. Both stories tried to tug at the heartstrings, but again, unusually for RTD, it felt empty and contrived. Thankfully, they also did have a pretty clear moral message, unlike the Christmas special where the Doctor let baby-eating goblins fly away. Though in the first episode, it was heavily highlighted and underlined in a broad felt tip. This episode is about a world without music, so I'm guessing you know where it's going to go. Now, I quite like musicals, and I don't really object to the odd musical episode. Once More with Feeling is particularly outstanding. And whilst this isn't a musical, obviously it features music pretty heavily. For the most part, it's fine and works within the narrative. There is one overlong scene which dragged a bit, but the next nail in the coffin was an awful musical number at the very end. I guess it was supposed to be whimsical, but it was painful, and such a massive tonal shift from what we just watched. and as such it didn't really work. It felt like it was one of those wouldn't it be funny if ideas that should have been ignored. And given some of the interviews Ncuti's been given, it probably came from him. So sadly the show has moved from being about a lonely god travelling the universe to high camp. It was like watching GLEE several years after GLEE was a thing. Everything Doctor Who about this show feels like an affectation dropped in by RTD when he suddenly remembered what he's supposed to be writing. It pains me to say too, on the music front, I'm not really feeling Murray Gold's score, and that is surprising. And the TARDIS set is too big. Evidence of too much money right there. It's vast, cold, empty. There's no personality, warmth, or intimacy to it. For the first time, I'm really not sure I can watch any more of this. It's stripped away everything I loved about the show. It just doesn't feel like Doctor Who anymore. And the question is, excusing the pun, who is this for now? So what did you think? Am I just being an old grump who needs to get with the times? Or pretty spot on about the decimation of this show? If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and peace out.